Hey everybody, Jason Sherman here. In today's episode of Zero to CEO, I speak with technical marketing content expert Karl Hughes. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, good to be here,
And we're going to
Jason.
talk about how to validate your idea and scale it fast, which is always important. I mean, so many entrepreneurs think they have the next billion-dollar idea, right? And then they try to build it and or market it, and then they fail miserably, spend time and money, and they realize that it was more difficult than they thought. What's some of the challenges or mistakes people make usually when they jump into that kind of thing? Like, what do you notice?
Yeah, the building before you actually validated that people need the solution, that seems to be, I would say that's number one. I actually just had a call with a guy this week who got introduced to me, and it's a textbook case of this. He has this cool idea for a thing that he would use personally. But as he's built most of the product, he's now doing customer interviews, and nobody wants this thing. Or at least, people say, "Oh, that's cool." This is the most dangerous response that new entrepreneurs get is, "That sounds cool. Once you have it, this and this feature, maybe let me know." Nobody's clamoring for it. There's no existing competitors. There's no space in the market for it. It's just a cool idea. And unfortunately, those ideas are really captivating for first-time entrepreneurs. I don't know what that is, but it is.
I always say,
I think.
Cool to have, but not needed is a big difference. It's got to be a pain point, right? You need to be solving. I mean, it's everybody said, Steve Jobs, everybody will say this. You had to solve some sort of problem and offer a value proposition. We talk about core value propositions, right? So how do you identify what that is? Like, how do you identify the idea to work on before you even get into scaling?
Yeah, there's a book called The Mom Test that I read when probably a few months before I started my company, Draft.dev, and it was really formative. The thing that I took away from that, and this is a paraphrase, but is essentially, don't look for problems that people say they want solutions to. Look for problems where people are spending money and not happy with the solutions they're getting. And that just, once you find those,
I say that a lot in previous episodes where even in my book or my course, it talks about how you should look for an overlooked market, something that people are just not looking at. And everyone's trying to disrupt, Facebook or Twitter or whatever. But what about like a 30-year-old platform that no one's looked at? And, like Quora. Quora is like the staple. Like what if there's a better version of that you could build? So I always say look for that kind of thing. Now, let's say that you did find a really good idea and you started building it. How do you make marketing content? Things have changed pandemic wise. So how do you make marketing content that is effective and that gets people interested in what you're doing?
Depends what your people need. I think the funny thing is there's a lot of fancy words and terminology and things that you can go into depth with marketing. But like a lot of disciplines, it honestly comes down to a lot of finding your customers where they hang out and listening to them and trying to help solve their problems is a lot of modern marketing. So content is a great example of that. I mean, a lot of really good companies have built brands off of content marketing. That's essentially just, here's a better way to solve your problem. And sometimes it uses our tool, sometimes it doesn't. We're just trying to help you and build goodwill. And over time, you get more subscribers and awareness, and that leads to sales. And so it's kind of a positive feedback loop that you need to just start building and helping people, and it sort of starts to pay off over time. Now, who you help and how you help them, that's where marketing like genius maybe arises, and that's where the hard part of marketing is.
Helping people and giving them information. So, I mean, I know one of the biggest things for like blogs, for example, it's a big no-no, is to talk about how your product solves a problem, right? You don't want to do that. You want to be more knowledgeable about the industry or space that you're in to offer people answers, right? And then they'll say, "Oh, that was great," and then I'll click on their header logo and then see what their product is. That's kind of the gist of it. But you mentioned talking to people where they hang out. Now, the pandemic has taken place and people are no longer hanging out in person as much. So I'm guessing you're talking about hanging out online?
Yeah, hanging out digitally. I mean, for our target market, we write content aimed at software developers. So they're hanging out on places like Dev2
Stack
and
Overflow,
Hacker Noon and Free Code Camp. Yeah, Stack Overflow, Reddit. So knowing those different platforms that they use. I mean, honestly, now I think
Yeah.
events are coming a little bit. Yeah, I mean, it's not full bore, but like we're definitely seeing more of them. But even so, I mean, with digital content, you're talking about just finding the medium that your audience wants. I think this is another thing people ask a lot about, like, should I use written content or video or audio? Well, what does your audience use? What do they want?
How do you figure that
also
out?
think about
Let's
like what
let's
are
let's
competitors
get into that, because like I have
Yeah.
a startup and we're doing
Yeah, yeah.
written content, video content, static content, imagery.
Yeah.
We're doing all of them because it's hard for us to figure out what they want, right? And we don't know who's watching, right?
Yeah.
Anybody could be watching. So let's talk.
Yeah.
How do you do that? How do you figure that out?
I mean, you're in that phase that every startup goes through of let's try 5 or 6 channels
Yep.
and see what sticks. And I think that's fair, especially if you're in a nascent market or you're trying to take a subset of a market that hasn't been fully sort of owned by a big competitor already. But yeah, it's essentially that. I mean, you can go try 5 or 6 channels. You can see what works for you. You can also, I think there's a lot of ways to approach this. One is to think about your personal strengths as a founder and your early team strengths. So in other words, if none of your team knows anything about video and you're going to invest tons and tons of time and money into video, I mean, good luck. I'm not saying you can't do it, but it's like you're pushing a boulder uphill, right?
I got you.
I say this to myself and my team too. And now you can go hire somebody who knows it. You can go get consultants who will help you get there. So maybe that's the path you take. But it is a little bit about knowing yourself and like what you honestly can do. Like if you're in a demographic that is not commonly seen or used on these channels, you have to think about like, are you really the person that needs to be the front face of your company?
We actually just faced that.
Anyway,
that's
so
a great point you just mentioned.
Yeah.
So my co-founders and I, 10 years ago, when we first started a business, we were younger, right? We were in our 30s and we were the face of the product. But now we're in our 40s.
Right.
We've gotten all these like young college students to kind of be the faces. So that's actually a great point, to know when to step aside as co-founders and allow fresh, faces to come in and kind of be. So you think that's a good idea to do that, is to kind of like.
Yeah, and it's true of written too. I mean, so for example, we write really technical content that is for marketing purposes. So it's written by software engineers, but aimed at software engineers as well. And the marketing team helps distribute it. Now, what a lot of our clients come in with is they have a marketing person who's been writing all this content and they have no idea how to really write for a software engineer. They've never used
GitLab.
Kubernetes. They don't use like Snowflake on a daily basis. Yeah, even GitLab. Like, so I think this is the thing too, is like knowing your limitations as a marketer. Like, should you be the one, or a founder, should you be the one writing this piece of content, or is there a subject matter expert out there?
And that's what we've been doing. We've gotten these really smart writing groups from colleges to take over that stuff, and they know exactly what. Yeah, and you don't have to teach them, which is the best part.
Yep.
Right.
Perfect. Yep. That's always want to find those little like chances for arbitrage, or somebody who wants a little bit of side, a side gig is kind of bored with their day job.
So you mentioned delegating quite a bit.
Yep.
We've both been mentioning this. Now, delegation comes with its own set of challenges. How do you effectively lead a team of content strategy and creators? Yep.
Big question.
I'm hitting it hard, man.
Yeah, I love it. So delegation, to me, it comes down to knowing all the steps in the process and then breaking them down for the individual people who will do those steps. And as a founder, often what we do is we start off doing all the steps ourselves. What a lot of founders never do is figure out how to break those steps into sub-components. So for example, when I started draft.dev, we do a sales call, we do marketing outreach, we actually then onboard a client, we then write their content, we then edit their content, we send it back to them. There's a ton of steps here. And the problem is, as a founder, I can just do them all.
You can't scale that.
So what I did instead, exactly, you can't scale that. So what I did instead was I tracked my time pretty religiously from the beginning and said, which step am I spending time on? And then when a certain step got to a certain threshold, I said, I need to hire a part-time or full-time person here. And so doing something like that, having a discipline like that, works the same in any level of delegation, whether you're delegating to I just hired a new director of sales marketing. Did the exact same process. So it's a different level, but it's the same idea. And same works for a content team. You break down the steps, you figure out what roles are needed, and you fill those in as
you're mentioning again, sounds like almost like an onboarding process, or providing a package of sorts to hand off to someone. Say, look, here's our method, here's our process, here's how we do it step by step, here's the outline. You follow this and you won't go wrong. And that's you're basically recommending people do that. They follow like a set of a process. Now,
Yeah, as much as possible. I mean, your team's going to
Right.
make it better, hopefully, over time, right? So, like, you want to hand it
Better
off to
than you.
people who go a level
How
further
do
and
you
make it
even come
even
up with
better.
that
Yeah,
process
yeah.
in the first place? Because I mean, you and I, we're experts. We know how to do that. But what about people listening or watching? What would you say the top 3 things that they should do to effectively create this process in the first place to hand off?
Yeah, I mean, I do a couple things. I used to do more like outlining my process. So I just kind of think through it, pull my bullet points, and then I'd follow those bullet points and kind of fill in the gaps. What I've been doing lately, which actually saves me a lot
Oh
of time,
yeah,
is using Loom videos instead. It's
nice.
just a screen recording software. But I'll essentially, like
Yeah,
go through this process and then hand it off to the person. And the
is
first
to watch the
assignment they'll
videos.
have, a new hire will have, is write down, watch the video and write down the actual process and do it one time, and then come back to me with all the questions and the missing
Nice.
steps that I forgot. And that actually works pretty quickly to get people up to speed, especially if they're pretty
It's like a
sharp and they
small.
kind
It's like
of
a
pick
homework.
up
It's like watching
fast.
like a study, like a Udemy course or something. It's like
Yes.
it's like a homework assignment. Like, hey, watch my tutorial video and then like figure it out from there, and then do. Right,
And
right.
then write me an
Do the
essay
homework. I like
summarizing
that's
it. Yeah.
I do something similar. That's actually where my YouTube channel became born. Like 20 years ago, was me telling people how to do things and then just saying, "Okay, I'm going to put them on tutorials and send you the link." So
Yeah.
that's fantastic. Now, let's say you're targeting draft.dev targeted software engineers, technical audiences, right? Which is mostly programmers or people who do infrastructure and back end, front end development, et cetera. What if you don't do that? What if you have, your startup is a product, or what if your startup is a consumer app or something? How do you then create marketing content aimed at the people that you're targeting? What are the best methods to do that?
Yeah, I mean, it really isn't that different. It's just the needs of your users are different. I mean, for
Mm-hmm.
software engineers, I can speak to my own personal experience with this audience. Like, they want help learning how to be more efficient as developers, solve problems that they commonly have, or use tools that are maybe already out there that they're being told to use at work. So maybe they're learning a new programming language or a new hosting system or whatever it is. So that's the kind of thing they want. So any product works the same way. What is your target audience looking for on a regular basis, and ideally looking for around the same
Mm,
time they're looking for your product? So you have let's just go to something consumer that everybody would know. If you sell shoes, what kind of shoes are you like selling, and who are you targeting? Let's say you're targeting people
right,
who are like running on the beach,
right.
right? So you have beach running shoes. So what do people
Uh,
who run on the beach do? They run on the beach, sure, but they also run on pavement. They also like wake up early. They also maybe do yoga. Like, you find the 10 or 20 things that they tend to do around the same time they're running on the beach, and then you figure out how to write content that helps
how
them
to
do
pick
those
out the
things
right
better.
sunblock,
And then
because
you
you're going to need
kind of
sunblock. They like being outdoors.
yeah,
Maybe like what kind of headwear to
perfect.
wear. So like, yeah, that's so you can really go in a lot of
Yep.
different angles in that. So basically, you're saying identify the target,
Yes.
figure out what those people are doing while they're out doing that activity or item, and then hit them hard there.
Yep. Yeah, target that activity,
That
but
goes
also
with it.
target all the things tangential to it. Because ultimately, yeah, you can't write 1,000 pieces about we have the best running shoes on the beach. Like, that's not going to work. Nobody cares. But you've got to be able to like catch those people at multiple different cycles and times, because nobody buys a purchase off the first piece of content they read, or
Right
very
now,
very
people like
few
you and I,
people
we're
do that.
entrepreneurs. We have idle hands, and we tend to put our hands in a lot of different areas because we can't just do one thing. How you and I,
It's
we
a
know
good
how
way
to
to put it.
manage. We know how to manage
I
these things. But
understand.
what are your 3 tips to tell people how to manage multiple projects at the same time?
Yeah,
Yep.
I mean, delegation, we've already talked about. That's the biggest one. I actually just this year launched a job board. And I think in the past, what I would have done is like started it myself, like gone through all the steps, done everything myself, made the first sales myself. This time I actually hired and delegated the whole setup for sales, the finding our first 500
Wow.
subscribers, all done by an employee. So as you get to different levels of
Hmm.
entrepreneurship, and say you have the cash flow to do this, you can start to hire basically a person to do the thing, to carry out your vision. Now, that's not easy to do, and like there's a
Of
lot of
course.
ways that could still go wrong, or could have gone wrong. But at the same time, like just sitting with that person and being like the critical eye, or knowing your audience really well and being able to help that person see that audience as well, that can all help. So it's about, to me, it's like the delegation is big, but knowing the strengths you have as an entrepreneur, whether it's the vision you have, the ability to communicate, the cash flow you
Hmm.
have, whatever those strengths are, and then putting them to work to get the most leverage for your hours. And so leverage for hours, like if you're there's there's a lot of entrepreneurs who are just really good tacticians. And unfortunately, they stick in the tactician world, meaning they're just always doing the hands-on work forever. But as soon as you start to learn the really high leverage tasks like communicating and creating tutorials that help other people do the thing 5,000 times, that's when you really start to move.
That's how you scale.
Move
and to end things here, let us know a little bit about draft.dev, what people can expect when they come to your website, and what you provide as a service.
Sure. Yeah. We do technical marketing content for companies that want to sell things to software developers. Mostly it's web hosting companies, developer tools companies, a super specific niche. But at the same time, there's not a lot of content providers that specialize in this. All of our 350 plus writers are software engineers, data engineers, people day to day, they're doing this technical work. So the really unique thing is you get hands-on practitioners experience in these pieces rather than just a fluffy SEO copywriter. No hate intended to those writers out there, because I know there's a place for that kind of content too. But it's just different companies need different things in their content. And we just found that a lot of companies were underserved in this niche. So that's all we do. Of course, if you need other help with content marketing or other marketing, I'm always happy to lend advice or things I've learned or other services that are better.
Thanks, Karl. Appreciate it. This is awesome. Hopefully people learned a ton from this episode. I know we put a lot in there, so I'm sure they have. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you guys in the next episode.